Hi everyone, welcome everyone. Good morning Spain and good morning Australia. It's 9 in the morning in Spain and 7 p.m. in Australia, in Victoria. 1 hour less in Western Australia. So thank you very much for joining us. My name is Sergio Alvarez and I'm a member of the Spanish Architects Society in Australia. And today I'm going to be the presenter of the SAS on Talks number 7. I'm sure most of you already know about our non-profit organization, but for those who are really new here today, I would like to tell you a little bit more about us and what we do before I introduce our guest tonight. The Spanish Architects Society Australia is a platform that acts as an active link between Spanish and Australian architecture, connecting architects and designers from both countries. We are a group of enthusiastic architects based in Melbourne, Perth, Sydney, and Spain. And over the past year, because of the pandemic, we have moved to the online world, organizing a series of online lectures with amazing and renowned Spanish architects working here on this side of the world and that have a real connection with Australia. If you would like to know a little bit more on us, please, you can follow on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn pages. You can also watch our previous online talks, and you can find them here on your YouTube channel. I would like to thank as well to the rest of the SAS team behind the screen, the Spanish Embassy, who is our major supporter, the Cervantes Institute, and obviously our speaker today, Patxi Mangado. It's a pleasure having you today here with us. Patxi is joining us from Navarra, which is located at the north of Spain. And before I tell you a little bit more about him, I would like to encourage everyone to write your ideas, thoughts, and questions for our guest on the YouTube channel, which is on the right side of the screen. And at the end of this talk, we will go over them. Francisco Mangado was born in Navarra in 1957. He graduated from the University of Navarra School of Architecture in 1982 and has been teaching since then at the university. He has also been a visiting professor at the Harvard Graduate School of Architecture, an Eros Arinen visiting professor at the Yale School of Architecture, guest lecturer at the École Polytechnique Fédérale de Lausanne, visiting professor at Cornell, and visiting professor at the Politecnico di Milano. Major works of his practice include the Baluarte Auditorium and Congress Center in Pamplona, the Archaeology Museum in Vitoria, the Spanish Pavilion at Expo Zaragoza 2008, the Asturian Fine Arts Museum in Oviedo, the recently opened Convention Center and Hotel in Palma de Mallorca, and the new Norvento Energia headquarters in Lugo. He's currently working on projects located in different countries, and this VC professional practice has brought him, among other honors, the Andrea Palladio Architecture Award, the FAD Award for Architecture, the Fernando Garcia Mercadal Award for Architecture, the Asturias Award for Architecture, the 2009 Spanish National Award for Architecture for the Spanish Pavilion at Expo Zaragoza 2008, and the Royal Institute of British Architects for International Excellence. In 2017, the Norvento building gave him the Fassa Bortolo International Prize for Sustainable Architecture, the silver medal category. He has also won the 2017 American Architectural Prize in the Architectural Design Other Architecture section. And most recently, he has earned again the Spanish National Award for Architecture in 2017 for the Convention Center and Hotel in 2011. He was accepted as International Fellow by the Royal Institute of British Architects, as in 2013 as an honorary member of the American Institute of Architects, AAI. In 2016, the Academy of der Kunst in Berlin gave him the 2017 Berlin Art Prize for Architecture in recognition of his work. In 2019, the Associazione Italiana di Architettura e Critica awards the Premio Nazionale Selinunte di Architettura. In 2008, he set up the Architecture and Society Foundation, Fundación Arquitectura y Sociedad, which in 2015 earned the gold medal for the Spanish Association of Architecture Institutes. In July of 2015, he was appointed a general coordinator of biennials, and under his coordination, in May of 2017, the Spanish Pavilion for the Venice Biennale won the Golden Lion. As you can see, Patxi is involved not just in architecture and urban design, but in the academia world and in the promotion of architecture. So please welcome Patxi. He's going to be sharing with us today his professional experience, thoughts, and learnings.
So thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure, yes, trying to give these lectures to these modern systems, contemporary systems that I don't like very much, but it's something that we have to do, especially because I remember many times the time that I was just in Australia for 2 weeks. I think that giving different lectures in different cities, and in fact, the feeling that I conserved of this time of this travel was fantastic, especially just because of the people that I had the opportunity of meeting there, especially in the schools. I remember that there were a quite important colony of architects just in relationship with this. And after that, I visited again just in other time, just with my very good friend Carlos Quintan, just in relationship just with precisely with the Biennale of Architecture that received this gold medal in. So in any case, I think that it's a pleasure being with you because I feel very, very, very comfortable, yes, speaking with to my Australian friends, a country where the architecture is so interesting, and unfortunately, not very well known here in Europe. I think that I will encourage you, yes, for interchanging and for trying to intensify this kind of relationship as as this one that is being developed just to the Spanish Architect Society in Australia, that I think is something really valuable, really fantastic, and in the same way that we are speaking just to Australian students and architects, I think that you should try to make the same just back in and trying to show here how this fantastic architecture by Australian architect is developed and how useful will be with us. Obviously, the way of working here in Spain, through the little knowledge that I have during this, I have just basically got from these travels that I have explained to you. The way of working here is quite different than working in Australia. I am an architect that I try to explain, a professor that I try to explain always to my students that the reality part of being just a problem for doing architecture is fantastic resource, a fantastic opportunity. I was trained in a school, a polytechnic school that I defend absolutely, on contrary of the Bozar school, where the architect we were training in the fantastic labor of constructing. So our way of making architecture is very close to has a very close relationship with the idea of being constructor. We are basically architects that make part of the main ideas that we are developing and managing continuously through our process of project just from this idea of the construction. So, for instance, I make the structure in my works. I not give my structures just to engineers. In Spain, is something that the architect, after finishing just the School of Architecture, we have it training in a very, or used to be trained in a very good and intensive knowledge about architecture and construction and structure. But unfortunately, this is changing just very quickly, just because the problem of the globalization is always introducing some different ways of facing architecture. In my opinion, is maker just much weaker the Spanish architecture, just because we are sliding down precisely to this model of Bozar way of training architecture that I consider is a big mistake. Yes, you can. I think that this idea, can give us an idea about what we are going just precisely now. I'm involved. My last project is not a project of architecture. Obviously, it's a project of architecture, but completely different of building. Is the creation of the new institute for the industrialization and use of robotics as a means as tools for doing architecture. The National Institute that we are developing together with the ETH, called Polytechnique de Zurich, precisely just in order to underline and try to recuperate this fantastic polytechnic training in architecture. I think that is absolutely important. We have to empower again our work. Otherwise, architect will transform just in facade advisors. So pay attention, the students. The reality is a fantastic opportunity for doing architecture, and the reality has to do with the context, has to do just with the industry that we have, has to do with the economy that we are using, has to do with the different devices for constructing that we have, has to do absolutely with our culture, has to do exactly with the real society that we are involved in. All of these elements, part of being a problem, are opportunities. I was trying it, or now in Spain, many professors are training the students, telling that you are in the schools, so this means that you are in a context where you have the last opportunity for doing architecture. After leaving the school, you will find the reality that is a problem in order to do architecture, because you have to manage money, you have to manage technical problems, you have to manage legal problems, you have to manage just the relationship with clients. Don't believe it. The good architect is the architect that transforms all of these problems in opportunities for doing architecture. The best architect is the architect who look at the reality with completely different eyes and has to know the problems and how to discover the problems behind the 3 or 4 more apparent layers that at the end are not the reality. So obviously, this way of looking at the reality as a fantastic result for making architecture is something that has to be done just from the knowledge. You have to make the most of your time in the school. You have a fantastic device. Never forget that you have all the history of architecture. All the history of architecture. That is the best tool that we have for doing architecture. I always recommend the students just to look at this history, but not in a very superficial way. Not only the skin, not only the images. Try to analyze the history as a fantastic instrumental way, looking at the plans, the section, drawing them. Everything is in the history. We don't invent anything. Just the architects that are offering continuously through the screens images that could be done by a graphic designer. They are not inventing anything. This is a very superficial approach for doing architecture. Architecture is basically just in the history. You are not facing just a white paper when you are facing the project. You know how to read the architecture that is surrounding us. That is important, and the history is a fantastic device. So it's true that in Spain, we used to work in this way, in a very close relationship with the reality. I think that still, especially the young architects that are claiming against this process of diffusing, of diluting architecture, again, and still they are keeping this idea that working with the reality, especially with the material reality, is a fantastic opportunity for doing architecture. Categories as the space, as the materials, as the textures, that many times are completely forgotten when the architects speak about the architecture of nowadays, are again recuperated as the most important and the most permanent and the most fundamental elements that constitute precisely architecture and our discipline. So what I'm going to show you is just 2 works of our career that has been done in completely different. I think that there is from one to other one is more or less 10 years of time, more or less. One was finished just in a little less, in the 2012. The other one was finished just 2018. So both are in completely different context. The first one is just a museum that is in the core of one of the most important historical centers, part of our heritage in the history in the north of Spain. The second one is in a very important city of Spain, one of the most significant Mediterranean cities, which is Palma de Mallorca, the capital of the Palma. Is a very big and long building that is in the waterfront, just facing the sea, in a climate completely different. Yes, it's a Mediterranean, where the sun always is brightening, is really strong, and is a program that, about 600,000 square feet, so around 70,000 square meters, and the building is half kilometer long. So it's a real urban scale, but both are facing with the same idea. I'm not looking for a style that can identify me. I prefer to think in the idea of unity. I'm not concerned about the identity in the sense of some images, some resources, some compositions, some materials that I use always independently of the site when I'm working in. No, I prefer to think about the unity of concept that allows me just to face the project with the same body of ideas, of concerns, but with the capacity and the freedom of giving different answers depending on the different temporal and physical context when and where I'm working in. So that's important. The way of facing the problems is more or less quite similar. The result you will see that are completely different depending on the circumstance. It's the same architecture, but it's the same architecture seen from the concept, not from the just only formalistic result. So the first one, I think that we are starting with it. Do you understand me or no?
Yeah, perfect, perfect.
Sí, empezamos con la presentación. We start with the presentation. Okay, I have chosen just only these two projects, just because as I thought that basically I will address this lecture to the students. I always prefer better than showing many different works, which obligate just to show just only images and very little concept. I prefer to explain more carefully two projects in a deeper way, because I think that it is always much more fruitful for the students. I always try to make with this kind of lectures an effort of pedagogic approach. So the first one is a museum, archaeological museum. Both projects are coming from competitions. This was an open competition to the different architects from Europe. We have to work, yes, this is the capital of the Basque Country in the north of Spain. And here you can read perfectly, you can read the almond that constitute the limits, the borders, define the Gothic almond from where is coming, yes, the rest of the history of this city, the capital of the Basque Country. So you can see in this photograph how dense, how is all of this housing area that is organized according with the different slopes, because this is a meadow and this is basically a hill that is going down towards the border. So this is a ellipse, more or less, with the center here. And then what happened is that you have here these streets that organize according in horizontal plans, obviously, and these which save, yes, the slope going down towards the border. Obviously, there was a wall that enclosed all of these medieval city. So the evolution of this city that is very typical. Sorry, as is very typical, yes, in this kind of cities, is that there are very narrow and very long plots that started just in one in one of these streets and arrive to this other one. But at the same time, after the medieval times, during Renaissance and Baroque periods, many of these houses were joined, creating a larger plot that were occupied just by different palaces that save to the most important public institution or just private institution as hospital, etc. So we have to work and we have to deal for making this archaeological museum, that is a very important archaeological museum. Wait a minute, I don't know, ¿esto se ve allí o no? Wait a minute, ¿esto se ve o no?
Yes, we are watching everything perfectly.
Ok, ¿esto se ve o no? Bueno, espero que no se vea. Bueno, ok, no, digo el título. No. Ok. Here, we have to work here, I will show you. In this plot, as you can see, we demolished this building that wasn't building uninteresting because it was a building that was in the first years of the 20th century, but in any case, without any kind of interest. But here in the corner, there was a historical palace that has been used, yes, 20 years ago, with a project that was a project of restoration that was very dry, very uninteresting in terms of architecture, but in any case, very important in terms that the collection of playing cards that were displayed, housed here. So at the end, the result is that we have just an L-shaped plot for making this building that was going to be one of the most representing buildings in the history of the Basque Country. You know, the Basque Country is very difficult probably for people in Australia to admit, yes, the political and historical reality of this country, but I'm sure that my colleagues from Spain will understand perfectly and they will guess exactly what I mean, is that the archaeological museum is a kind of, because there is a group, very important part of the population represent just an independent political statements against the central government. So the archaeological museum became a kind of flag of this independency. So it was it's a building that was built, yes, in a quite complex political and historical context, also social and political. Even you have to take into account that there was a group of terrorist group that was called ETA, that for a lot of time has kept just the society and the economical and the political affairs of this country in a situation really quite complicated. So in this context, the idea of making here the archaeological museum has a political and historical significance. It was really important building. So the different competitors offer just different buildings just here, and we make just a statement in the sense that for us there were two ideas that were important. The first one is the way of setting the building just here in this medieval context, we could say. No, for one hand. The second one, it has to do with the idea, a programmatic approach, ideological programmatic approach in the sense what means just archaeological museum. So following the first urban approach, our idea was to define a building that was completely following this L shape, but creating just a courtyard that could be interesting in order to develop develop the entry, but also as a system for creating a little public space that you can guess here is really difficult finding in this very rough and very dense context. So the idea, one of the problems is that the relationship between the public space that is constituted basically by the street to the house always is quite immediate. No, you open the door and you get in the building. For me, it was very important, always has been in the architecture, this idea of the process, about how you get in, how you arrive, how you cross the building, how you are in the building. So for this idea, we thought that creating this space could be very useful and fruitful, especially also because we create a space of relationship with this pre-existing building that we shouldn't touch, or in any case, we could establish another kind of relationship. I think that this public space is particularly fruitful. Also because this provides with a space, taking into account that we were creating just an important museum institution, just a space for simply for waiting, for staying here, for sitting in a bench. Also because the complexity of the programs with this L shape, this L shape was really useful in order to house the different programs. In the sense that we have the big exhibition areas that are in the main building, but as well, but the programs, the servant programs, as the offices, yes, the archives, etc., that they could be housed in this little arm of the scheme, L scheme, and that you can see here is following in this composition the language and the dimension of the medieval way of occupying the plots that were really narrow and very long. So this system of organizing the building without considering the inside space was providing us a very simple device, tool, for solving not only the general relationship with the Vitoria city, urban relationship, but also yes, some more specific, smaller devices for playing, for establishing a relationship, yes, with the humble, the more humble the housing and way of occupying here. Yes, because we pass from big scale, yes, to the little scale that is here. Also, as we needed just an area for temporary exhibitions, this was very interesting because these temporary exhibitions, were housed just here, and in this manner, just what happened is that people who get in could get in directly just to the temporary exhibition without getting necessarily just to the main building that could be closed, for instance, during the weekend, and however this should be open. So this is the basic strategy of in terms of urban approach. The second one you can see here exactly, and also what's happened is that you can see here, this is the big. The big is not really big, but it's quite well defined in terms of scale. But at least you have the idea that you get in here and previously properly to the main access to the interior of the buildings. So, in terms of program, we have to excavate 4 levels underground, just because the exhibition areas is not the only important element of this kind of museums, but also is important, absolutely important, to foreseeing just enormous spaces, just for catalogs, for housing the different pieces that are excavated just in the ground and are coming directly to the museum. Obviously, I don't want to extend my explanation, but obviously are necessary laboratories, spaces for classification of the different pieces, etc., etc., etc. The second idea, here you can see what I explained. With this kind of geometry, we establish a dialogue with the profile that you can see with the different limits of the roofs. And at the same time, we hide just this wall that otherwise will be completely seen and just very disturbing in terms of the quality of architecture. Yes, during the night this is closed, during the weekend is closed. However, you can get directly to the this is one of the vision of the space. Here we are concentrated the servant services. Under this floor is just also the library, and that is provided with light through this English courtyard. So what is happening inside? How organized is properly the different spaces? So I explained about the underground levels, but basically how we organize the areas where are displayed the different pieces of the museum. What is an archaeological museum? For me, obviously, is something very different than this big museum institution, contemporary museums that are very massive with a lot of people go there, I don't know, more as having a holiday days than enjoying of the pieces that they can see. So a museum is something that is very personal. a museum, archaeological museum. Archaeological museum is something that you can appreciate because you read through the different pieces that are exhibited, displayed there, the history really of your people, of you. And I think that is particularly important. It's a very intimate, it is a kind of intimacy in the relationship in between the pieces that are displayed here, there, and the viewer. I think that is extremely important, extremely important. So we use the metaphor of that we are making the coffer of a fantastic treasure. And how is a coffer? Coffer is something that is blind, probably, is something that is very close. So our idea was to how, and the other question that is extremely important is how architecture can represent the time. Listen, students, the most important material for doing architecture is not the light. Obviously, the light is well important and very cheap. It's something that can manage and can use the architect. What is the most important? The time. The time is the most important nowadays, not only for art, has been always the most important, but perhaps nowadays we have lost the conscious that is the most important. We need time for studying the architecture. We need time for thinking about the project. We need time for developing the process of the project is really important. Never should be something immediate. It's something that requires precision, requires study, requires research. We need time, but the buildings need time for being themselves. Nowadays, we open the buildings immediately with a big holiday. All the politicians are opening the building, and this building has been lost in this fair of vanity of buildings that are dilute. No. The best building is the building that that is improved with the time. That is I don't know, is acquire a kind of value with the time. That with the time is better. So that is really important. That is really important. So, but how architecture can represent the time is really difficult because you don't think that we represent the time. One of the possibilities that we have is using the space, and I tried to do this. Look, using the dark with the brightness. And then we decided to make this void here, creating this coffer. We house all the exhibition areas, yes, in these 5 meters. That is, in these 5 meters, we contain just the staircases that lead us from the ground, underground levels, or the ground, the access, yes, to the upper levels of the exhibition. And here we use just for housing all the pieces. That at the same time, we are solving just an important requirement, which is, that particularly the archaeological pieces are very delicate. So you need a kind of mechanical system assistance that is completely different for each piece. So you can have, yes, a piece of argent and wood that need one specific grade of humidity, and the other one is completely different. So it's full of mechanical system tubes, and then we lead all of these just here, which allows precisely just to the people of the maintenance to operate and to change without the interference of the building. So outside, obviously, the way of expressing the building has to do with this idea of the coffer. We use this copper seat that is changing with the time. This building, I think that was finished just 12 years ago, probably. And each time that I go to visit it, the facade is completely different. But not only because of the reflection of the light that really is important. It's just because the time is working, is producing different effects of this surface. This surface is made with the copper, and the bronze. They are materials that has a very close relationship, yes, with all the archaeological museums or the archaeological pieces, because were materials that were used, yes, for the people, for the historical people. And in order to look, yes, for a kind of deepness in the facade, this is not a plane, it's not a sheet, is something that is a geometry that is producing, yes, these vertical elements which provide us with shadow that also is really important. So inside, the space is quite empty. Everything is made with the black wood that is Bengay, that probably you know very well because in Australia you use fantastic woods. And this is crossed for this. Here you can see on the left this 3 meters wall that is constituted by 2 layers. In the middle of the layer is just the staircase that while we are walking up to the different exhibition levels, you can see precisely the entry and the temporary exhibitions. And when you arrive, there are little pieces in the middle, the most significant, because all the pieces are precisely housing here. You have the entry here. This allows just the maintenance people to get to the different vitrinas and just to operate on them. But this is the atmosphere. The atmosphere, obviously, the collection is really rich, it's fantastic, it's super. But at the same time, we need a space with this kind of intimacy. This light is coming from the roof, and as this country is a region of Spain that is not particularly, the sun is not very strong, it's a quite dark region, it rains a lot there. So I think that we support just with artificial light, but in general, and just only is these volumes, inclined volumes, are providing with the light. So this is image is an image in the night. So the second building is a building that is completely different. The program is I don't know. I think that we are in time or no?
Yes, we are okay. Yes.
Time or I have to, when I have to stop, please let me know. Okay?
No, we're on time. We are okay.
Okay. Okay. So it's completely different. It's in Palma de Mallorca. This was the result also of a competition. In this case, we were invited 8 architects. That was Rogers, I think, Eduardo Souto de Moura, Rafael Navarro, Dominique Pegol, 8 architects from Europe, and we were lucky of winning the competition. But it's a quite large building. I told you it's 500 meters, more or less, 400 exactly, 70 meters. Okay, we can use this, but is in front of the sea. So this is the city of Palma de Mallorca. Palma de Mallorca has the origin always in the Roman period, but obviously later was basically developed just by the Gothic times with a fantastic architecture. You can read here in this grid. After that, this was enveloped by some fantastic Renaissance walls that just define, you can read here the most ancient historical perimeter with a special geometry that is coming from this engineering, this military engineering that they make a fantastic architecture. And the water the sea used to be to get us here. So all of this has been gained just to the occupy on the sea. So this is a program which includes the most important Congress Palace of Spain with the conference room, yes, a theater or opera for 2,500 people, and yes, with another one for 500 people, yes, exhibition areas for 7,000 square meters, yes, a hotel with 100 rooms. So it's an enormous program which get to more or less 600,000 square feet. And the budget was more or less $160 million, okay, American dollars. And so the question is, when we were invited for making the presentation of our approach in the competition to the jury, I promised myself never speaking about the building, because obviously with this huge program in this position of the city and with these dimensions, obviously I have to think about a part of the city, a piece of the city, and I have to face the project from this point of view. I was not doing a building. Obviously, I was doing a building, but basically, I was doing just a part of the city. Pay attention, for instance, that for me this is important. Pay attention to this. This is the prints of the walls. Pay attention this wall, this Renaissance wall, that when you see, yes, when you look at this from the sea, you see this urban dimension. Pay attention to the profile of the new building. It's exactly with this dimension. So we are speaking about the kind of urban print. We are we are dealing with a scale that is coming from urban approach more than for buildings. That is important. Pay attention, this fantastic, one of the most well-known cathedral in Spain and in the Mediterranean. That is 200 meters, unbelievable. Pay attention that when you look at this, it's really big and really very important. And so pay attention with this. So we decided not speaking about a building. Our presentation was concentrated in the urban idea, but basically with two ideas. The first one is that if we analyze this photograph, we can see here this is a fantastic walk that is obviously the waterfront, but that link the most important activities in relationship with the sea. Yes, here you have the different harbors, you have the different sport sheets, you have the cathedral, the most important institutional buildings. But what is the most interesting is that this fantastic walk, promenade, that is linking all the city has become, at the same time, the most important regional urban space. Because what's happened is that this link not only the main city, but also some other little cities that are in the skirts of Palma de Mallorca, little villages that are very important. So has become a kind of regional public space that structure not only the city, but also the territory. So obviously, we consider, and we explain this, if this is the work, that the building, our building, should be a kind of second arm of this public space, and that we should make easier, we should make a very easy, yes, the possibility that the people that is working here could split, yes, here their work and just get in the building in a quite natural way. So this implies that the ground floor became a kind of ambiguous space in between what is happening inside and what is happening outside. So keeping in the back of your mind this idea, because later it's very useful in order to explain the project. The ground floor is a kind of sequence of different spaces that one time are in the interior of the building, another way are outside, but the majority of the time are in the middle of the boat. Second idea is that we can use exactly the way of not only for living just the ground floor as the occupied by all the activities. The idea was, why not using the facade for making the staircases that are that allows just the people getting to the different levels of the different activities, but also and priority yes to the roof. And then we concentrate in the roof all the public programs as the different cafeterias, restaurants, activities. So in some way, what's happened is that the facade of the building became a kind of second, the second arm of this big work, public work, and just allows just the people through going up through the stage that are in this facade, just to get to the upper level. So in some way, all the building, all the program was contaminated by this public role that is extremely important. The second one is the way of formalizing this. So making a building of 500 meters long could be absolutely boring. And also what's happened is that the uniform of this facade would be stupid, especially taking into account the complexity to use the same geometry that is coming from this military civil engineers, that obviously they were trying to give answers to the serious problem that was the defense of the city against the pirates that come here. But in my case was important in order to define just a kind of convexity, of concavity elements which fragmented just the scale, the dimension of the building, and at the same time create some particular spaces for each of the programs that we include inside. So we guarantee the unity, we will see how, but at the same time, we may just coherent this with the idea of some fragmentation. I was trying always to escape of this idea of making something boring, okay? This is the result. This was models that we use for the presentation. Here you can see one of the models that we use for the presentation, is trying to explain how about this geometry that is coming from the prints of the wall, we at some time that we guarantee the unity of the building, we organize different parts of the building for different. Here we concentrate all the hotel, yes, with this bridge, because what's happened is that we have on a street here that was interesting, and in order to keep the opening just to the sea. Fortunately, just nowadays, what's happened is that this way for accessing to the city coming from the airport is going to be sink, and there will be just a tunnel, and this is going to be clear and complete continuity, yes, with this wall and towards the sea. That is important. But the second question is, if obviously I wanted to open my building to the sea, but what's happened is that the southwest here in Spain is terrible from the point of view of the energy. The sun touch with a lot of power, with a lot of heat, and then we have to save energy. That's what's very important. Try to avoid, to receive light is fantastic, but trying to avoid the energy coming from the sun. So when the answer was here, the answer was in this cathedral. Obviously, these elements were made, yes, for structural and static issues. But we use the same idea of the deepness, something that you can read in Le Corbusier, all the idea of making just okay, of making a very deep facade that for me is very important in order to avoid the sun. So, and this is in fact a little the solution. We make just a quite open the ground floor. In some way, you can read as the continuity, yes, of the peatone areas, and these are creating some spaces for access to the different. This is exhibition areas. This is the hotel, but always these triangles of these elements are areas that has a roof. The building, the elevated the elevated stages are on these areas, creating this kind of shadow areas, yes, covered, but that are open just to the street, but at the same time you can see later. And then what happened is that this bridge soleil that is 6 meters wide has a structural role, important structural role. At the same time, it is controlling the light, the sun that is impacting directly during the day, but allows obviously the access to the light. And at the same time, has the different mechanical systems and the staircases, just for getting to the different levels, even to the roof floor, without necessarily getting in the interior. So this is the development, and here is the construction. I like to introduce this photograph, especially to the students, because as I told you in the start of my lecture, in the for the Spanish architecture, and particularly for me, is very important the construction process. So I like this photograph extremely, just because you can read the prints of the building. So in some ways, this is quite similar the prints that you can find or you can read, yes, in the medieval, in the Renaissance buildings, in the rest of the Renaissance buildings. So if we analyze, we return just to the first photographs, you will read exactly this geometry. So I like this because more even than the building, after finishing the building finish, is this kind of foundation of elements which establish the relationship with the tradition. Imagine that this building is demolished in 100 years. What will remain? Precisely these prints that I like to do. This idea of allowing just to the time. No? So this is the construction process. We control everything in Spain. So here in Spain is different. Are not the engineers are not independent. The architect has the responsibility about the structure. I work with my engineers, but many times I design the structure. Sometimes I make little calculation, but we are prepared for doing it. But the question is the calculation. The question is knowing how the building works structurally, because the structure and space is absolutely in continuity, conceptual continuity. So for me, it would be impossible. I always work with section and with plans. I never work with facades. The facade is something that I'm not keen on it. So, but this is important. So the section, cross section is especially important. So you can see the construction. This is a view precisely when we finish all the structure. That I appreciate this photograph because it's precisely the skeleton. We could have finished just here the building in some way because everything is expressed. And here you can see the immense void, yes, the immense space, yes, for the main important auditorium for 2,400 people. So this geometry were really complicated, no? We defined this facade is fantastic because it's a facade that in fact allows us to make unbelievable cantilevers because the facade is the bearing structure itself that is, you can see, we concentrated here, yes, obviously I repeat, the climate behavior, the relationship with the history, yes, the structural elements, and at the end, the formal inspection of the building, you will see. So, different phases of the construction, and this structure is completely different just towards the north. Towards the north, the building is blinder, the building, the light, but extraordinarily rich, coming from a process that is absolutely committed, with the medioambiental approach, with the sustainability, but it's really rich. But it's used for the tanks. And immediately, because it's really light, which means that the tanks go very fast, but at the same time, yes, with the weapons, impact, they absorb the heat energy of this impact. So it's really, and the process of making the manufacturing is really simple. I don't know with this, with who it is, just because. What it is, just because the owners, they were very preserved the secret of this production. But in any case, I thought that I could use for doing it. And this is the material we use for enveloping it. It's a material that was extraordinarily well against the salt of the sea. So the behavior is unbelievable. Also, what's happening is that the quality of the reflection with the light is extraordinary because, in fact, we are working with a kind of aluminum stone with different grades of density. But this is very easy for manipulating. And just what's happened is that it's coming from a sector, a military sector, that is completely different. But it's the kind of things that I try to say to students. Try to look for everything. So architecture is not obvious. You have to investigate, to look, you have to be keen on everything, interested in everything. The architect, we play with very complex situations. We work with situations with a very high degree of complexity. But precisely we have the capacity of simplifying this and giving a good result. So we have in the back of our mind thousands of problems that are working together, but we are precisely training in this capacity of extracting from this a fantastic solution. Well, okay, this is the result. It's a result that I like to see that is in some ways quite similar to the skin of the fish that you can fish on the sea, and just the reflection of the light. Yes, when they impact, when they reflect on the skin of the fish, you know, it's okay. This is finished. This is exhibition area, and now we are going to read a little these spaces. This one, or just this one, or just this one. that is precisely the spaces that are outside, obviously, but at the same time are inside, do have a roof, they are covered, but are in continuity just with the outside. So in some way, is this kind of island of shadow, just trying to avoid the direct impact of the people when the sun is touching very strong. You can get here at the same time are the different entries to the different spaces. I repeat that the building is really huge. The ground floor is not tall, is very, I think it's 2 meters point 20, precisely to express this idea that we are getting in the building not through a ground floor, it's just a basement. We could say it's in some ways the basement of this big structure, and you can see the alternance, the transit in between the open space, covered space. This is the entry to the hotel, and here you can read all of these entries that are used just with this structure that is resting on this stone, that is the same stone that is used for the roof and just for the north facade with this building. So inside we use this fantastic wood. When you cut this wood, is quite white, but in 2 months, this oxide has suffered an oxide process and become just with these red and brown colors. The spaces, the intermediate spaces that for me always are the most important in any kind of architecture. So because we focus many times our attention in the main spaces, what is perfectly logical and interesting. But what about the intermediate space? The transit space are the most important in my opinion, because always are different. If you provide with the kind of spatial richness, the result is extremely fruitful and powerful. So these the access, obviously, as the staircases are in the facade, what's happening is that forgetting to the volumes, for the access into the different auditoriums, we have to create these bridges that create this kind of atmosphere, that if the atmosphere will be were dark, what we could speak about the kind of Piranesian spaces. Fortunately, has light, but it's quite. These are the staircases, yes, in the middle of this big facade that is 6 meters that we use for housing it. The different spaces, the access, yes, is the interior auditorium. The same space. I like this photograph because it's exactly the same that the photograph of the construction that I have saw it just some minutes ago. Pay attention because it's exactly the same. How changed. So architecture and the buildings, the construction for me is really a process that is fantastic. I never accept a building, I never accept a commission that I can control, if I can control just the construction. And if I have not the total control of the construction, even on the engineers, etc. Otherwise, I don't accept. This building, pay attention, this building has been, when I go to the United States, my colleagues say, okay, you must have just an office of 200 or 300 people, because for making this building, do you know how many architects of my office were here? 2 architects, and me. And we control everything. We have not ¿cómo se dice esto? Project manager. We control everything. And the price was in the budget at the end. Even we finished the work with a less expensive budget. And we control all the elements. So that is important. This is the idea of working here, artisan. We are 15 people in my office, no more. Different images, yes, the exhibition areas, yes, the Congress Palace rooms, and here is precisely just here. At the moment, is not with the furniture, but these are the restaurants. And the restaurants, when the people that is walking through the sea promenade, they got here through the staircases that are in the facade, they arrive to this space. So I like this idea of creating a continuity with these roof spaces just with the sea, without looking at without seeing just the traffic that is in front of the building. That I repeat, this traffic now is this is the hotel. I don't want to extend more the presentation. We design everything, and I will finish with this photograph just only with a little reflection to the students. Students, you have the right of committing mistakes. You have to commit mistakes. You have to assume risk. You have to be dealing with architecture. It's a fantastic profession. Obviously, it has a lot of problems, a lot of difficulties, but just only one time that you visit the world, the architecture can provide you with fantastic energy for, I don't know, 2 years of problems. But assuming risk, that is your right, needs to be very well trained, needs knowledge, study the history of architecture. Don't develop just only an interest on the facade, on the images. Try to analyze what is happening inside. Try to analyze which are the ideas that are behind a project. Don't consider architecture just only as a subject of facade, of images, of bidimensional approach. Architecture is always a structure in relationship with the site. You have in Australia a culture, a rich culture, and you have to express this culture through your architecture. That is important. Architecture is not a consequence of just working with images. It's much more. Think about the modern architecture. They were wrong, perhaps, in many different things. They were so naive, but at the same time, is so fantastic that they wanted to change society with their architecture. Obviously, they were wrong in many different ways, not in all of them. But pay attention about how powerful and how much they believe in architecture as something that is useful for transforming human society. Thank you very much, students, and enjoy your time.
Thank you, Patxi. It's been perfect. It has been a very nice presentation, and we welcome, some questions we have from the audience. So, we are run out of time, so we don't have too much time to spend now. Can you hear me, Patxi?
Sí, te escucho.
Yes, just a couple of questions, okay? Because I think it's been a nice presentation, and you have been very inspirational for all of us during our studies at the university, as well for our professional careers. So we have been studying your buildings and your approach to the projects for a long time. And you have been talking about the ingredients you use for your projects, talking about the time, talking about the light, historical constraints, construction, the building process. I would like to ask you just one question about the public and private clients. So, because you have been working on different cultures, different countries, and how do you feel is the building and design process depending on the countries? So, do you find any differences between a private, public client, and different cultures?
Obviously, there is a great difference. So, in the majority of the buildings that I have done, 90% are coming from public competitions. So, my main client has been always the public. And obviously what's happened is that when you are working in this context, you have a kind of freedom that probably is completely different than you are working with the private. But pay attention that I'm speaking about the freedom, because obviously this doesn't mean that it's better public and private. It's different, simply different. So what's happened that perhaps with the public, there are not previews. At the end, what happens is that with the public, you have more control on the work. Because when you have to do the construction, for instance, the administration, has not an idea. The public administration, the public servants, at the end, what happens is that they want me fulfill the budget. They try to, but they have a kind of confidence. You have in Spain at least, you are the main controller of everything. When you are working with the private, at the end, what happens is that the private corporation, yes, the private clients, in fact, I never have received, yes, I have never received, sorry, I have never received just commission for making housing. I don't know what's the problem. I don't know if everyone thinks that I'm very expensive or something like this, but always I make just big buildings. That I'm quite, not don't believe, but I'm quite demoralized, and many times I wonder why people don't commission me for making housing, because I like to, or a charge that I like to do a charge. But when I work with private, I have made a lot of social housing that I like a lot. But you work with private is different, because obviously for them, it's not because they are much more concerned about the money, because it's exactly the same. It's just because many times they have some previews of some ideas that are coming from different fields of architecture, for fields different of of architecture. And then what happens is that these previews could be more demanding, and you need time just for illustrating, for training them about architecture, and you need more time for explaining them how another solution is better. But at the same time, this is really fruitful, because after this dialogue, what happens is that the result, if they are convinced at the end, what happens is that they are will support. The problem is when after this dialogue, at the end, you have to abandon the war. That to me has not happened very often, because I always try to understand also just the, but it's different. Speaking about countries is completely different, even in Europe. In Spain, as I explained to the students, you have the responsibility, legal responsibility about everything, even on the structure, the constructive process. However, when I work in France is completely different, because the only thing that is required by the architect is just the the basic project. But the constructive details of the, or even the structure, has to be developed by the constructor, the builder. So that is quite stupid, because at the end, what happens is true that your responsibility is not as strong, and here as is not as severe as is here. But at the same time, what's happening is that you are controlling the. In theory, you have to approve, you have to test the constructive solution. But at the end, what happens is that you are losing the control of the project. And then what happens is that the construction process many times is the result of many different decisions that are not focused or are not under the umbrella of the best architecture. Many times what happens is that they are only concerned about the legal responsibility. That obviously the legal responsibility, I don't mean that is not important, but it's not, shouldn't be contradictory with a good architecture if the architect has the control. Mm-hmm. It's completely different in any case. But probably Spain is one of the few countries where still we preserve where we still preserve just the control on all the process.
And what about in these countries? Because you have mentioned previously that you only get commissions, you only get projects in which you can have a real control on the construction process. So in these countries, when you can't, because you are working with many consultants and the delivery process is different.
I have not the same control.
It's not possible. So
no, for this reason, I always, if I had the opportunity of working in Spain, I prefer to work in Spain than abroad. But unfortunately, in Spain at the moment, we have more and more architects and less work. And then the result is something that you can see. Yes, I imagine that there is a lot of Spanish architects in Australia. I know many of them. Spanish, yes, because they are looking for probably a fresher country at this time. A fresher, I don't know, relationship with the nature, and also for working in architecture. But at the moment, I have the most important or the main works that we are developing are in Belgium, just in France, or just in Italy. And I repeat, the control on the process is much more reduced than in Spain. Even many times I have to face the dilemma of deciding if I continue with the work, because if I have if I have the feeling that I can control my architecture, I prefer renounce, deny working there.
Yeah. No, it's quite interesting, yeah. So I have a few comments here from.
But this is the result of a process, of general process of the society. We are living in a society that are absolutely frightened about the risk. They try to control everything, everything.
Yeah.
They control every kind of danger, even if doesn't exist the danger, just only if someone imagine that it is danger. So we are extremely frightened about the risks. But the society always has advanced to the social risks or personal risks. The challenge are risks. So, and then what happens is that the architecture is contaminated with this atmosphere. In Spain or in Europe, I don't know, the number of regulation in the last 10 years has been multiplied, I don't know, by 1,000. I remember that we used, I don't know, a month ago we were recuperating, I don't know why, some old drawings that I used for making one of my first works just 30 years ago. That was a winery in Olite. No, sorry, in the golf course in that was a national prize of architecture. And then, but with this, an unbelievable work was done, I don't know, with 50 plans that I have drawn myself, and just with a little book of the regulation. Now, this will need just 2,000 plans and 2 meters of papers for the, but the fact is the architecture will probably worse. Just because what's happened is that all of this has to be done by different people. There is not idea, and also what's happened in the society and the corporation system of producing is dividing architecture that they were just partial projects and losing the unity is what I was telling. So at the end, what happened is that is the project of architecture, the project of the structure, the project, and they sum everything. This is the result. No. And what about the integration of this? What about the coherence in between all of this? What about the general idea that lead, that guarantee the value of the process? So this is the role of the architect. When someone says we are the director of an orchestra, it's true. It's true. Now what happens is that the orchestra has no director. And this is just because a result of the economical evolution of our society and the legal evolution of our society, basically. I repeat, everything has to be tested, everything has to be proved. And then what happens is that at the end are the security companies are behind of this. So this, for instance, imagine I was speaking with the Álvaro Siza and Eduardo Souto de Moura, that are very good friends, you know, the Portuguese people, Pritzker Prize, and they are very good friends. And we were speaking precisely about the work that we have in France. And the three were completely upset and very disappointed with this way of working, because the three are architects that for us, the idea of the materialization of the project is really important. And then if you have not the control of this is something that many times I repeat, you return, you go to visit the world and they say, and or even they offered you being artistic advisor of the world. And I say, artistic advisor, but you are mad. I'm the architect.
Yeah.
So they offered you in the contracts. Here in Spain, I have the control on everything. There they say, okay, they offered you for a project that you have designed, being the artistic advisor. But what is artistic advisor?
Yeah.
This is stupid.
Yeah.
And this is the problem. I don't know how it's in Australia.
I mean, this is coming to the holistic approach you are talking about. In Australia, it's different because at the end is, I mean, here the architect role is more focused on design, and of course, it's as well because of the contract process.
Sergio, when you say the design, then the question is how we conceive the design. Because I mean, an architecture design has to take in the back of the mind, has to take into account just the structure, just the materials, the space. So it's not the question of, can you imagine the project that I have shown you when they say, okay, for instance, it's very typical, okay, and later we will have just interior designer. What? Interior designer in my buildings? I don't need.
Yeah.
I conceive that the architecture of one. I define, when I'm making the architecture, I'm defining what is happening inside. What is this about the interior designer? I mean, I respect the interior designer, but in my case, no. In my case, I mean, I don't need it. I don't need them.
You are right. Architecture should be everything. Should be from the small scale to the large scale, and should be the whole process. So it's what you are talking about, the holistic process.
Yes,
So because you are the person who is having control on everything, and of course, all the answers should be coming from the architect, because he knows. I mean, how the project is going to be working, and he's putting just in place all the constraints.
But the other question is that in my team are people that knows specifically about interior design.
Yeah.
As we have another people that know about furniture. This is important, but we work together.
Yeah. No, I mean, I understand, and that's one thing we need to look after very carefully, because you mean, so the society sometimes is just trying to defer this kind of task to incorporate more and more people, but of course there should be one person who is running the whole process. Yeah, totally agree. I think we don't have too much time for this conversation, so maybe we can just run through one last question. Because I mean, you have been talking about the holistic process, and of course, how you are integrating all the environmental solutions into the projects. So that's one thing you are trying to get in every project, depending of the budget. So
absolutely. I mean, the question of there's another question. The question of sustainability of architecture, or commitment with the climate. I mean, I think that this is an architectonical problem. It shouldn't be something that is imposed. So when I work in a context, my architecture has to be absolutely aware and concerned about the climate, the orientation, the way of working and the techniques of the site, the industrial process of the site. So at the end, I mean, for me, it's quite, I mean, obviously, but I can accept as a building that for instance, in Spain, there is a legal regulation which obligated just to put on the roof a lot of photovoltaic. It's okay. It's okay. It's perfect. But I can accept this. But then they don't control if the building is very well orientated, for instance. No, it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
You can find projects that, from the point of view of architecture, are really stupid because are very bad orientated. And just because the architect wants to have a drawing facade just facing, but this is stupid. But obviously they put a photovoltaic plant. So that is stupid. So the good architecture always has taken into account this process. It's nothing new. Yeah. Or could you believe in Australia, architecture that is done there, fantastic architecture made with wood, very aware about the climate. This architect has been working just with I don't know if in a aware way or no, but in the little village of Spain in the north, the people used to do buildings with very thick walls of stone, orientated towards the south because here is very important the sun. So I mean, that we are not inventing anything. We are using sophisticated technologies that I don't know how much cost, that I say, okay, we can use it, but what about thinking in architecture, taking into account all of these problems? It's the same problem. Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't do the same architecture in the north of Spain that probably in Sydney. I should be aware about the technical process, the materials, the orientations, the climate in Australia, that obviously will be different. So I mean that for being aware about the environmental approach and the sustainability, better architecture.
Yeah.
This is the solution, the device. Not a lot of technical systems that I don't mean that these are not important. It's okay. But I repeat, you can use a lot of photovoltaic, right? But the building is bad orientated.
No way.
There is no regulation what they speak about the orientation of the building.
Yeah.
And you are losing unbelievable amounts of energy because the architect is a very bad architect, and you are spending money for using photovoltaic plugs.
Yeah.
It's a joke, but expressed clearly. When I speak about contextual architecture, I imply yes, concern about the environmental issues, obviously.
Yeah. No, totally agree. Yeah. Just to finalize, so are we expecting you to see and to have any projects in Australia or in other countries? Or
I wish in Australia, but the problem is that I receive a commission for work in Australia. Perhaps I will remain there for the rest of my years.
And you need to move here.
For the rest of my life. I have no problem. I have two children that at the moment I'm thinking about changing. I'm looking space, yes, for spending my last year just only writing about architecture, not building, not necessarily building.
Yeah.
But what the problem is that I'm 64, and then the university starts to say that, okay, you have 3-4 years for being retired. Oh my God, it's unbelievable. I'm going to do yes. The new school that we are going to create, this institute, is going to collect just only retired professors, 70, 71, that are with a fantastic mental capacity, that are retired from their universities, and I'm going to collect all of them.
Yeah.
Because they are really smart, they are intelligent, they have experience. It's unbelievable. I mean, but no. What I would like is just to visit again. I have been 2 times, but I would like to visit again Australia, obviously. What about this problem with the fire? Everything is okay, because I was really very concerned with these fires that you have on the forest, no?
Yeah.
1 year ago, or it was 1 year or 2 years ago.
2 years ago, yeah.
And it was terrible. I really felt very, very sad.
Yeah.
But it's a fantastic country, Australia. Last 2 times that I have been in, I have it there. I